January 2013. Downtown Los Angeles. A budget hotel with a grand old name, the Cecil, standing on the edge of Skid Row. People pass it every day. Most don't look up. Her name is Elisa Lam, 21, a Canadian student traveling alone. Curious, bookish, a diary always in her bag. She checks in for a few nights, planning bookstores, coffee shops, the kind of wandering you do when a city is new and you are too. She phones home, she posts online, she sounds hopeful, and then she goes quiet. January 31st. A camera in an elevator records her. 4 minutes that will circle the internet for years. She steps in, presses buttons, peeks into the hall, steps out, steps back. Her hands move in quick shapes like she's trying to explain something no one else can see. The doors don't close. She hides, then looks again. And then she's gone. Her parents report her missing on February 8th. Police search the hotel. Dogs sweep hallways and the roof. Nothing, or maybe not enough. Days pass. Guests complain. The water is weak. The taste is wrong. The color, not right. A maintenance worker climbs a steel ladder to check the tanks on the roof. Inside one of them, he finds a body. February 19th, 2013. It's Elisa. People ask the same question. How did she get there? A locked rooftop door, a heavy tank lid, a slim girl, alone. The coroner's report arrives. Accidental drowning, no evidence of assault. A note, bipolar disorder, a significant contributing factor. The kind of line that sounds clinical, but carries a lifetime of meaning. If you don't know the Cecil, you should. It opened in 1924 with marble and mirrors, and then history bent. The Great Depression, Skid Row, a long ledger of tragedies. Jumps, overdoses, a falling body that killed a man on the sidewalk, even serial killers passing through. The building became a myth you could rent by the night. So when Elisa's story hit the news, when that elevator video went viral, the world connected the dots into monsters, ghosts, curses, conspiracies. But cops, doctors, and time pointed back at something smaller and sadder. A young traveler, unwell that night, in a maze of locked doors and industrial steel. Let's walk it carefully. The elevator footage, recorded February 1st, released February 13th to seek tips. Her behavior looks erratic, pressing many buttons, stepping in and out, making shapes with her hands. People online read it as fear, or play, or possession, but clinicians see something familiar, a potential psychotic episode. The coroner's line about bipolar wasn't random. Hotel logistics. The roof access is alarmed, but workers use alternate routes. Ladders on the tanks are exposed. The lids, heavy but openable. In that space, at night, you could climb. You could slip, and once inside, cold water, steep walls, and no leverage to climb out. Panic turns to exhaustion, silence. Still, there are details that won't stop whispering. Why didn't the dogs find her? Why didn't anyone hear? Why did the water taste wrong for days? Because the tank was sealed from sight, and sound dies on the roof. Because a hotel with a past like the Cecil invites stories, and stories breed faster than facts. Because grief hates the word accident. It wants a villain. Sometimes there isn't one you can name. The official answer sits in a few sentences. Elisa Lam climbed into a water tank and drowned. Mental illness contributed. No criminal charge. Case closed. But for the rest of us, it's not. We replay the elevator. We imagine the roof, the wind, the city's neon buzz. We picture her choosing the wrong door. We picture her not choosing anything at all, just drifting through a night that got sharper, stranger, until steel and water took her in. There's another reason this story shakes people. Because hotels feel like containers for other people's lives. You close a door and the world shrinks to a bed, a lamp, a humming fan. You trust the building to hold you together. But the Cecil had been leaking tragedy for decades. And when tragedy happens in a place like that, it echoes. It colors the walls. It makes the ordinary feel haunted. If you stand across the street at night, the Cecil looks like a stack of dark teeth. Some windows glow, most don't. The rooftop is a silhouette, angles and ladders and tanks like sleeping giants. Somewhere up there, in February wind, a maintenance worker lifted a lid and changed a family forever. Elisa's parents asked for privacy and for people to remember their daughter as more than a mystery. She loved books. She wrote about loneliness and kindness and the small ways we stay alive together. Sometimes internet detectives forget that the case file ends with a person, not a puzzle box. So here is a truer ending. A young woman traveled because she wanted the world to feel larger. On a winter night, her mind betrayed her. A hotel with too much history and too little safety got the rest. When people ask why this story haunts them, I say, because it could happen to someone you love, in a city you trust, behind a door you've already closed. Because horror isn't always claws and shadows. Sometimes it's a ladder, a lid, and a mistake no one comes back to explain. If you ever ride that old elevator, if it still runs, you'll watch the numbers glow and hear the cables moan. You'll think of 4 minutes of video and a girl who steps out and never steps back in. The doors will shut on empty air and you'll feel it. How a place can remember even when people try to forget.
Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mug.
I woke up this morning with a strange thought stuck in my head. Scrolling through my phone, half awake, I stumbled on something that shouldn't exist. A new Labubu collection, but not the kind you'd find in toy shops or even online stores. This one was different, darker. People called it the Forbidden Series. It wasn't listed on official websites. No pre-orders, no announcements, just whispers, screenshots in private groups, collectors talking in riddles, as if naming it directly was dangerous. And that was enough for me. I needed it. I messaged one of my contacts, a guy who always bragged about having access to rare figures before anyone else. When I asked about the Forbidden Labubu, he didn't reply right away. Minutes turned into hours. Finally, one word lit up my screen. Meet. No address, no time, just meet. That night, I found myself standing in a dim parking garage, the kind where every footstep echoes too loudly. From the shadows, a man approached. No smile, no introduction. He carried a small black box. No labels, no markings. When I reached out, he didn't let go right away. He leaned closer and whispered, "Once you open it, it's yours. Forever." I laughed nervously, thinking he was just playing along with the creepy reputation. But when I blinked, he was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just me, holding the box. Back home, I placed it on the table. For a moment, I just stared. The box seemed heavier than it should have been. Its surface felt warm, almost like skin. Finally, I lifted the lid. Inside was a Labubu figure, but not like the others. This one wasn't smiling. Its face was twisted into something between a grin and a snarl. Its eyes, glassy and dark but not empty. They looked like they were watching me. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Collectors always joke about haunted toys, but this felt different. This wasn't a joke. That night, I placed the figure on a shelf with the rest of my collection. But I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I swore I heard faint scratching. Tiny footsteps across the floor. And once, when I turned on the light, the Labubu wasn't where I left it. It was closer to my bed. Over the next few days, things got worse. My phone began glitching whenever I tried to take a picture of the figure. The screen would distort, colors bleeding into shapes I couldn't recognize. Once, I managed to snap a photo before it froze. And in that image, the Labubu's mouth was wide open, filled with sharp, jagged teeth. But when I looked back at the shelf, the figure was normal again. Normal, if you can call it that. Friends stopped visiting. They said my apartment felt wrong, like the air was heavy. One of them swore he saw something move in the corner of his eye. A small shadow darting across the room. He left and never came back. I tried to ignore it, tried to tell myself it was just paranoia. But then came the night I woke to find the box back on my table. Closed, sealed, as if I had never opened it. My hands shook as I reached for it. This time, when I opened the lid, the figure wasn't alone. There were two, identical, both staring at me. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I slammed the lid shut and ran. I don't even remember grabbing my keys. When I returned the next day, the apartment was silent. Too silent. The box sat exactly where I'd left it. But now, it was empty. I searched every corner, every drawer, every closet. Nothing, until I finally dared to check the mirror behind my reflection. Small shapes, moving, dozens of them. That was the last time anyone heard from me. They say a neighbor complained about noises, scratching walls, laughter in the middle of the night. When the landlord opened my apartment, all he found were empty shelves and a single photo lying on the floor. A picture of me, surrounded by figures, all of them wearing that twisted Labubu grin. And if you're hearing this, maybe it's already too late, because the forbidden collection doesn't stay with one person forever. It spreads, it waits, and maybe it's waiting for you next. The Lake Bodom Murders, Espoo, Finland, summer of 1960. A case still unsolved to this day. Early summer, June, the kind of bright Nordic morning where the sky feels brand new. A quiet lake outside Helsinki, Lake Bodom. 4 teenagers pitch a small tent on the shore, 2 couples, a night of jokes, stories, and the soft hush of water against rocks. It should have been ordinary. It should have been forgettable. They fall asleep. The wind dies. The surface turns to glass and holds its breath. Somewhere between 4 and 6 in the morning, something steps out of the trees. Not a ghost story, not a campfire tale, a person, a real one. The tent doesn't open from the flap. It collapses, slashed from the outside. A blade, then a blunt impact, a storm of blows through thin canvas. No warning, no chance to run. Hours later, a carpenter walking the path near the shore notices the tent, torn and flattened. He goes closer. He freezes. 3 teenagers are dead. 1, barefoot, lies outside, alive but broken, his face smashed, his memory a shattered mirror. Police are called. Noon sun, crowds gather, too many boots, too many eyes. The scene, precious and fragile, gets trampled before it can speak. The names still echo in Finland. Maila Irmeli Björklund, 15. Anja Tuulikki Mäki, 15. Seppo Antero Boisman, 18. And the survivor, Nils Gustafsson, 18. An ordinary summer night, broken into pieces. Investigators recover odd details that won't sit still. The attacker struck from outside the canvas, cutting and beating through fabric. The murder weapons, never found. Some belongings vanish as if the killer wanted trophies or time. Motorcycle keys gone, while the bikes remain. Later, Gustafson's shoes turn up half hidden in brush, far from the tent, as if someone wore them after the blood was spilled. Theories breed like midges over the water. None land. Witness whispers travel the shoreline. Birdwatchers say they saw a tall blonde man walking away as the tent sagged at dawn. Another neighbor remembers a kiosk owner who hated campers. Violent, erratic, a figure locals already feared. But the trail is mud and footprints wash away. In the first crucial hours, the lake keeps its secrets. Days become decades. The tent, photographed in harsh daylight, turns into an icon of fear in a country that usually measures crimes in quiet voices. Bodom becomes a word you don't have to explain. Children grow up. The families do not move on. Summer after summer, the water warms, boats drift, and every June the newspapers print the same faces. An entire nation keeps looking at that torn canvas, trying to see the moment before it split. The Guardian. And then, 44 years later, something shifts. New forensics, old bloodstains revisited, arguments rebuilt. Police arrest the survivor, Niels Gustafsson. The theory, a fight that spiraled, injuries staged, evidence misplaced. It is the cruelest possibility, survival recast as guilt. In 2005, the trial fills the headlines. The courtroom is a bright room where an old knight is forced to speak. But the verdict does not give Finland its answer. Not guilty. The case returns to the lake, to the fog, to the silence between ripples. The state pays compensation for the long shadow of suspicion, and the file remains open to the wind. Listen. If you sit by the water in early June, you can still hear what the investigators wrote down like inventory. Attack from outside the tent, missing keys, weapons never recovered, scene contaminated. They're not just facts, they are holes. And through them, stories pour in. One story says the killer knew the shoreline, knew which path would keep his shoes clean, which stones wouldn't clatter. Another says the culprit was a stranger who came and went like a cold front. Another insists it was anger turned monstrous, a human thing, jealousy, humiliation, there in the dark, between people who trusted each other. None of these stories changes the same photographs, the same hours that went missing from memory. Details tighten the throat. The tent sliced by someone who refused to knock. Blows rained through cloth at sleeping forms. The lake was calm. The air was bright by mid-morning, and still. No one saw what mattered, not in time. Even the footprints turned argumentative, some pointing one way, some another, as if the ground itself refused to testify. It's tempting to add thunder to the story, to make it a gothic fable, but the terror of Bodom is that it doesn't need thunder. It needs only a thin wall of fabric and the knowledge that, while you were sleeping, the world outside decided you did not get to wake. There's a way the Finnish papers still write it every June. 3 teenagers murdered at Lake Bodom. 1 survivor left unconscious with broken bones and a concussed silence. Arrested decades later. Acquitted. Killer unknown. Each clause is a shoreline you can walk with your eyes. Each comma is a breath you have to take. Sometimes people ask, why keep telling it? Why open the tent again? Because this wasn't a ghost story. It was a night the world let happen. And because somewhere between 4 and 6 a.m. on the 5th of June 1960, summer itself was forced to swallow a scream and pretend to be just another morning. Imagine you're there. The day before you swam, you laughed, your hair smelled like smoke. You tied the guy lines of the tent a little carelessly because nothing bad ever happens here. At 3:57 a.m., the lake is a black coin and the birds are just beginning. At 4:12, the first soft step presses moss flat. At 4:13, fabric whispers under a blade. By 4:14, your name has already become a headline that doesn't know it yet. And after, everything is procedure and failure and timelines that don't quite meet. After, there is a nation trying to fit a knife into a motive. There are books, documentaries, a feature film, and a museum of comments under every article, each sure they finally know, but the old photographs keep refusing to confess. The lake keeps doing what lakes do best, reflecting whatever stands over them. The guardian, stand at the shore, breathe. Listen to the easy summer noises, boats knocking at their moorings, a distant dog, reeds ticking in the wind. Then remember the tent. Remember that the worst things are not the ones that rattle the trees. They're the ones that slip a blade into quiet and count on sunlight to make it all look normal again. If you go there now, you won't find a plaque that explains anything. You won't meet a chorus who can sing the name of the killer. You'll meet June. You'll meet a waterline that never stops smoothing itself, and a country that still, in its careful way, keeps watch. And somewhere, not far from the path where the carpenter once walked, the shore holds an old breath, the kind you take when you wake and realize the canvas is caving in, the kind you never finish. Have you ever felt it? Something standing just outside your sightline, a ripple in the air, a shadow that shouldn't be there, and yet is. Tonight, we're not talking about the absence of light, but a presence that steals it, the unseen shadows. Are they tricks of the mind, or visitors we weren't meant to see? Watch the wall. Light wavers, shapes stretch and bend, the room breathes. Shadows aren't static. They drift with dust, with heat, with your heartbeat. Our brains stitch that motion into meaning. But sometimes the shape that forms feels like it knows you're watching. Long before motion sensors and night vision, people told the same story with different names. Figures at the edge of lamplight. Visitors in doorways that never open. Folklore speaks of watchers, spirit silhouettes in deserts, silent companions in forests, hallway presences that pass like a cold draft. Across continents, one theme repeats. The outline arrives first, and the meaning follows. Science offers tools and humility. In low light, your vision switches to night mode. Motion sensitivity rises, detail falls. Peripheral vision fires first. Your brain predicts, fills gaps, protects you. It invents faces where there are none, pareidolia. It smooths away static until something pops back, Troxler fading. Between waking and sleep, you may feel a presence, hypnagogia, or wake frozen, seeing a figure at the bed's edge. Sleep paralysis. These are not failures, they're features that sometimes misfire. Now we point cameras into the dark and ask them to witness for us. Security footage, phone clips, dash cams, pixels stretching, compression smearing, infrared blooming. Technology can both reveal and deceive. Forums fill with midnight testimonies. A shape crossing a hallway, a nursery cam that catches movement when no one's there, an office light that flickers only when a figure stands where no figure should. We scroll, we doubt, we believe, we fear. I'll tell you mine. It started small. A flicker beside my bookshelf where nothing should move. I blamed the streetlights, the cat, a draft. Then came the night I felt watched. No footsteps, no breath. Only that sense, like a word stuck on the tip of your tongue. I turned my head and the shadow vanished. I looked away and it returned. I spoke into the room as if it were listening. If you're there, don't come closer. The light dimmed, just a whisper, and came back. Maybe a cloud, maybe. I slept with the lamp on until morning. 2 truths can exist at once. Truth 1, the brain is a prediction engine, and darkness is its worst data set. Truth 2, even with that knowledge, some encounters refuse to shrink. They feel aimed at us. They arrive with timing, intention, story. And stories, especially the ones the dark tells, shape what we see next. So what are unseen shadows? If you ask folklore watchers, if you ask neuroscience misreadings, if you ask the midnight version of yourself, something that waits until you look away. Maybe our perception is a keyhole, and something on the other side sometimes leans close enough to dim the light. If that thought makes you check your doorway right now, that's the point. Tell me your encounter below. What did you see when the room said you were alone? And if it happens tonight, keep the light on long enough to decide which story you believe. What is breathing in the walls? Mara didn't believe in haunted buildings, only in cheap landlords and bad wiring. She told herself that again the night she moved into apartment 3B on Wren Street, a crooked Victorian chopped into thin slices of life, the kind of place where the hallway carpets never lay flat and every stair knew your weight. It was late November. A dry wind dragged at the eaves, and the radiators coughed like old men. Mara set her single box on the kitchen counter, opened the cracked window for air, and listened to the building settle around her. Pipes clinked, the refrigerator hummed. Somewhere upstairs, a chair scraped. Normal sounds. She was grateful for normal. She'd taken the place because it was cheap and close to work, and, though she'd never say it out loud, because no one from her old life knew where it was. Fresh start, she told herself. New town, new job, blank page. At 2:17 a.m., something exhaled behind the kitchen wall. The sound wasn't the normal sigh of a heater or the rush of a pipe. It was distinctly human, slow, laden, the breath of a sleeping person just on the other side of the plaster. Mara froze, one hand on the sink, and held her own breath to listen. The wind gusted. The window rattled. Silence. She laughed once without humor. Old house, she said to the empty kitchen. Old houses breathe. At 2:19 a.m., the wall inhaled. She slept with the lights on and woke to weak winter sun and the smell of someone else's cooking in the hallway. The day made her bold. She knocked on her neighbor's door, apartment 3A, and a pale woman with linen-thin hair opened, a wool shawl wrapped tight. "Hi, I'm Mara. Just moved in. Did you hear anything last night?" The woman's mouth softened. "You heard it at 2 in the morning." Not a question. "I thought it was the pipes, but it sounded like breathing." The neighbor nodded, stepping back so Mara wouldn't see the crucifix nailed above the coat hooks. "The walls carry old buildings. I'm Mrs. Doyle." She hesitated. "If you hear humming, don't hum back." Mara tried to laugh. Not even to be polite, Mrs. Doyle said, and closed the door gently, as if keeping something from waking. The first week passed in a new job blur, setting passwords, learning faces, pretending she belonged in an office with glass partitions and Tuesday donuts. Nights were harder. The breathing returned, always around 2:17, a slow wash behind plaster. Sometimes it came from the kitchen. Other nights, it nestled behind the headboard or the closet. Once, half asleep, she reached out and laid her palm on the wall. The plaster was cold as a river stone. Thursday evening, she met the super in the stairwell. Mr. Finch, short and barrel-chested, the kind of man who spoke through his nose. He smelled faintly of bleach. "How's 3B treating you?" he asked, jangling a ring of keys. "Fine. The heat's a little temperamental, and there's a sound at night." She smiled, aiming for casual, like someone breathing in the walls. Mr. Finch's smile hardened. "Probably raccoons in the crawl. Happens. I'll set a trap. These are interior walls. Sound carries," he said, exactly like Mrs. Doyle, and moved on. That night, Mara made tea and left the television murmuring to drown out the building. Around midnight, a knock came at her door, soft and hurried. She flinched and peered through the peephole. A blur, a dark shape. In the end, it was a kid of maybe 14, hair shoved under a knitted cap, eyes puffed from crying. "Do you have tape?" he asked when she cracked the door. My window won't stop whistling." She found a roll in her box, clear packing tape, and handed it over. "You live?" "2C, he sniffed. "Our mom's at work. The walls are loud tonight." "Tell me about it," she said before she could stop herself. The boy's gaze darted beyond her shoulder toward the kitchen. "Don't open it," he whispered. "Open what?" But he had already turned away. The tape clutched like a lifeline. On Saturday afternoon, Mara decided to prove something to herself. She took photos of the apartment, corners, vents, baseboards, zooming in on cracks and hairline seams. She pressed her ear to different spots and recorded what she heard. When she played the recordings back, tinny and too loud, there it was. A long inhale, a pause, a longer exhale. No rattling, no whoosh. Flesh, not metal. At dusk, she went down to the basement under the pretense of laundry. A single bulb swung on a chain, revealing the slow heart of the building. The furnace crouched like a sullen animal, ducts wrapped in silver tape, walls of blotched stone. She discovered a door she hadn't noticed before, painted the same dull gray as the wall, with a metal hasp bolted across it. Someone had screwed the hasp shut so many times that the wood around it was chewed. She bent and pressed her ear to the seam. Cold seeped into her skin. For a moment, nothing. Then, so close it seemed to be inside her own head, there came a hum. It was tuneless, low, the aimless sound a person makes when they don't know they're making sound. "Oh, oh, oh, oh." A long breath became a melody and then collapsed again. She jerked back and smacked her head on the swinging bulb. By the time Mr. Finch's footsteps thumped on the stairs, she was upright, chin high. "Laundry," she said. "You drop something?" His eyes flicked to the bolted door and away again. "That room's supply, nothing to see." "What's inside?" "Old junk, pipes. Don't worry about it." He leaned to check the hasp, as if to reassure himself. "You need anything, leave a note. Office hours are posted." "Do the walls hum for you, Mr. Finch?" He looked at her then, really looked, and his mouth softened with something like pity. "Tenants hear all kinds of things, miss. They bring their own too. He tapped his temple. I suggest a white noise machine. Mara lasted another week on tea and noise and denial. At work, she stared at spreadsheets while the columns slid into lines like counting marks on plaster. At night, the breathing drew closer. 2 nights, it seemed to come from inside the closet, and she dragged a chair against it just to be sure. On the 3rd, she woke to a sound like someone running their finger along the underside of her mattress. She turned on every light and sat on the kitchen floor, back to the sink, knife in hand. When 2:17 came, the exhale was so close it stirred the hair along her jaw. "Who are you?" she whispered. Silence. Then, not words exactly, but a pressure, a weight in the wall that felt like a tension. She did not sleep. In the morning, she knocked on Mrs. Doyle's door, and the old woman let her in without a word, as if she'd been expecting it. Her apartment smelled of lavender and dust. A kettle sang. The crucifix on the wall was joined by an old photograph of the building when its paint was new. "What lives in these walls?" Mara asked. "Please don't say sound carries." Mrs. Doyle poured tea. "Something got into this building a long time ago. I don't know what to call it. I call it not alone." "Is it a person?" "I think it was." Once she wrapped her hands around the cup, knuckles the shape of drier stones. "There was a man before your time, lived in 3B with his wife. They shouted a lot. Then she went quiet. Then he went quiet. Mr. Finch found their door open one morning. No one inside. After that, if you listen at night, the walls breathe. Sometimes they hum. It likes a response." "Likes?" Mrs. Doyle's eyes were water clear. "Buildings remember what we feed them. Grief, fear, names. This one learned how to ask for more." Mara folded her arms tight around herself. "So you ignore it. You do not answer. You do not hum back." Mrs. Doyle set her cup down. "If the humming changes to a whisper, you leave." Mara lasted 3 more nights. On the 1st, the hum braided itself with her name, not quite spoken, more like the memory of a sound held in the jaw. Ra. On the 2nd, something tapped under the kitchen sink, a patient exploratory sound, as if counting the screws that held the cabinet to the wall. On the 3rd, she dreamed she was lying inside the wall itself, plaster pressing her ribs, dust thick in her mouth, and when she woke, there was grit between her teeth. She couldn't live like this. She left a note for Mr. Finch. "Noise in 3B is unbearable. Please check ventilation," and took the afternoon off work. She bought a crowbar at the hardware store on the corner because the man behind the counter didn't ask why. Back home, she turned off the heat and the lights and waited. At 2:15, the building hushed, as if holding its own breath. "Okay," Mara said into the quiet. "I hear you." The walls didn't answer. They didn't have to. The air thickened, as if it had to push around a body to reach her. She went to the baseboard under the kitchen window, where the plaster met a strip of wood so old it had dried to hairline cracks. She tapped until she found the hollow. There, a pocket of space. She wedged the crowbar in and pried. The baseboard shrieked free. Behind it, in the 2 inches between wall and lath, something gleamed. A strip of cassette tape. She pulled. More came. Yards of it, knotted and looped, spooling like intestine, brittle in her hands. It had been fed through a thin slit, cut into the plaster, and then stuffed back. At the end was a small recorder, the kind with red buttons and a plastic mouth. It was on. Her skin crawled. She didn't press stop. She pressed play. The machine clicked. White noise filled the kitchen. The soft sea sound of tape, a faint hiss. Under it, her own breathing. Under that, another breath. She turned the volume up. The other breath was steady, not the pulse of a machine or the sway of a tree. Sometimes it paused, sometimes it hitched, as if listening. Something moved behind her. She spun. The kitchen was empty. The window showed only the black gloss of night. She could hear Mr. Finch's boots in the hall, slow and careful, as if testing each board. The recorder hissed. "Mara," the wall said, not from the speaker, but from the seam itself, and she flung the crowbar at it. The sound the bar made when it struck was shockingly alive, like hitting with a bone. The hallway lock turned. Her door opened a hand's width and stopped. Mr. Finch's voice drifted in. "You called, miss? Thought I heard." The breath in the wall drew in, slow as a tide. "Don't come in," Mara said, but she didn't hear her own voice over the sound that came next. From the baseboard space, small and dry, the rustle of something dragging itself forward. She grabbed the recorder, and the tape twisted around her wrist like string around a kite. In the hall, Mr. Finch's key scraped. The chain she'd set pulled taut. He swore softly, "Open up." Mara backed toward the sink. The room's edges had softened, as if they'd been fingered under running water. The seam where the baseboard had been seemed deeper, a dark line that widened as she watched. Breath washed over her face, damp and oddly sweet, like lilies left too long in a vase. The chain on the door snapped. Mr. Finch shouldered in. He stopped when he saw her and the hole. His eyes widened behind his lenses. "Don't," she said, and didn't know if she meant don't come closer or don't look directly at it, the way you don't look straight at an eclipse. He took one step, then another, his keys ringing faintly. "This has happened before," he said, so quietly she might have dreamed it. "Sometimes it wants to talk. Sometimes it wants to be let out." "What is it?" He shook his head. "It starts as a sound. It ends as a room." The seam widened with a sound like paper tearing. A shape pressed through, only the impression of a face at first, as if something on the other side were pushing at damp wallpaper. Then fingers, long and wrong, slid into the kitchen light. Plaster dust fell in soft drifts. The tape recorder whined as if its batteries were dying. Mr. Finch did something then that Mara would remember, uselessly, for a long time. He set down his keys. He put his palm flat on the wall beside the widening gap and spoke not to her, but to it. "You can't stay," he said, and there was a terrible tenderness in his voice. "You took a husband and a wife. You took the boy from 2C's father. You cannot take again." The fingers paused. The breath hitched, almost a sob. For a heartbeat, the kitchen was only dust and two humans and an old machine whispering someone else's lungs. Then the hand pushed farther through, reaching. Mr. Finch grabbed the crowbar and swung. Plaster exploded, the kitchen filled with a dry, choking storm. The fingers vanished, the seam gaped, and then seemed to heal, closing to the thin lip of a crack. The recorder kept hissing. Mara stood with her back to the sink, shaking so hard her teeth clicked. Mr. Finch leaned over, hands on knees, coughing. "You should go," he said after a long time. "Tonight. Will it follow?" He considered. "It doesn't have to. It's in the building. It learns you. It learns your name. Why didn't you tell me?" He straightened, white with plaster dust. "People don't believe, or they do, and they feed it. Walls like this." He stopped, as if he'd overstepped some private rule. "There are other places to live." Mara packed before dawn. She didn't look at the baseboard as she passed. In the hallway, Mrs. Doyle's door was open a sliver, and the old woman's eye glinted there like a bead. "Do not hum back," she whispered, and shut herself away. Mara left her keys on the super's desk with a note that said, "I'm sorry." She drove until the town thinned to fields, until morning was a pale seam on the horizon. She forced herself not to look in the rearview mirror because she knew if she did, she would see the building riding in the distance like a ship, all its windows unblinking. A week later, in a quiet sublet with clean drywall and a view of parking lot trees, a package arrived with no return address. Inside, a cassette labeled WREN. On its side, a strip of tape had been peeled and stuck back too many times. Mara set it on the counter and stared until dusk. She shouldn't. She wanted to. At 2:17 in the morning, she pressed play. Nothing. Hiss. The refrigerator's hum. Her own breath. She laughed, shaky with relief, and reached to turn it off. From far away, through 1,000 miles of tape, someone exhaled. Then, deliberate and patient, it learned how to say her name. Lake Michigan was calm that night, the air still warm from the day. Teenagers from Manistee, Michigan, had gathered at a sandy beach called First Street, a place for laughter, swimming, late-night dares. But one of them would never come home again. His name was Terry Sutter. He was only 15 years old. Terry wasn't the kind of kid people expected to end up in a newspaper headline. He was funny, athletic, popular with friends. That Friday, he told his mother he was heading out with a group, the same way dozens of kids did every weekend. There was nothing unusual, no warning. But in the early hours of September 1973, someone found him on the sand, face down, unmoving, already gone. At first, people thought maybe it was an accident, a boy who drowned, maybe too much beer, too much fun, a swim gone wrong. But the autopsy told a story no one was ready to hear. Terry hadn't drowned, he hadn't hit his head, he hadn't had a heart attack. The cause of death, written down by the medical examiner, was something so strange, so rare, it left investigators stunned. Massive inhalation of sand. Try to picture that for a moment. A 15-year-old boy, lungs completely filled with sand. Not a little bit, not a handful, enough to choke the air from his body, enough to block every breath. How does that happen? Who dies that way? On an open beach? Police began asking questions. Was it a freak accident? Did Terry collapse, face down in a dune, and suffocate before anyone noticed? Or was this deliberate? Someone forcing him down, holding him there, pressing his face into the sand until he couldn't breathe? It didn't take long for whispers to spread. Terry was murdered. Witnesses remembered seeing something strange that night. A group of people near the edge of the beach, around a car. They weren't laughing, they weren't talking. One described hearing the heavy slam of a trunk closing. Another claimed it looked like they were carrying something, or someone. But the darkness swallowed details, and in the 1970s, there were no cell phones, no instant recordings, just fragments of memory. By the time police arrived, the scene was already contaminated. Curious teenagers, worried parents, neighbors all crowded the beach. Footprints covered the sand, cigarette butts littered the ground. Evidence slipped away with the tide. Terry's injuries deepened the mystery. Bruises marked his body, scratches on his face, his arms, signs of a struggle. If he'd simply fallen, why the marks? If he'd stumbled into sand, why were his shorts partly torn, his personal belongings scattered? And then there was what was missing. Certain items, his house key, small things from his pockets, were never found, as if someone had taken them. As if someone wanted souvenirs. The official ruling never satisfied anyone. To call it an accident felt insulting. To call it murder demanded proof police didn't have. So the file lingered, open but stagnant. For Terry's mother, the days became torture. She would sit by the window, waiting, as if her son might walk home at any moment. The family begged authorities not to let it go cold. But time, cruel as it is, kept moving. Decades passed. The beach changed. Generations of kids went swimming in the same water, never knowing the story under their feet. But for locals, the name Terry Sutter still carried a chill. Because the truth is this: Terry's case has never been solved. Years later, investigators revisited the evidence. They interviewed classmates, friends, even old witnesses who still remembered that night. Some believed Terry had gotten into a fight. Others swore he was targeted. And some thought it was all a prank gone wrong. Teenagers daring each other, not realizing the risk until it was too late. But the sand detail never let go. How do you prank someone into filling their lungs with sand? How do you force that without intent? It always came back to the same word: murder. Think about it. Someone had to pin him down. Someone had to ignore his struggling, his gasps, his muffled cries. Someone had to keep pressing until the fight in his body stopped. And then they walked away. Some theories turned darker. There were rumors about older boys, people with grudges, even adults who had been on the beach that night. A man known for violent behavior, seen nearby, never fully questioned. Another story about a group fight where Terry was outnumbered, but none of it held together in court. No witnesses willing to sign their names, no fingerprints, no murder weapon, just the endless silence of sand. In 2021, nearly 50 years later, Terry's story resurfaced in local news. The police acknowledged the case remains open. His family, those who are still alive, begged again for answers. They said, "Don't let him be forgotten," because for them, the wound never healed. How could it? One moment, their son was alive, full of teenage energy, teasing his siblings, planning his future. The next, he was gone, suffocated in one of the most bizarre and terrifying ways imaginable. If you go to Manistee today, you can still find First Street Beach. On a bright summer afternoon, it looks ordinary. Kids laughing, waves rolling in, seagulls screaming overhead. But if you walk alone at night, when the beach is empty and the wind rattles through the dunes, it feels different. Locals say the sand there never sits still, that when the moon is high, you can hear faint coughing, a boy gasping for breath. Some even say if you stand barefoot too long, the ground feels like it's pulling you under, hungry for another victim. Whether you believe the ghost stories or not, one thing is certain: the real horror isn't a haunting. It's that Terry's killer was never found. 50 years of silence, 50 years without justice. A 15-year-old boy buried alive by sand and no one punished. January 2013. Downtown Los Angeles. A budget hotel with a grand old name, the Cecil, standing on the edge of Skid Row. People pass it every day. Most don't look up. Her name is Elisa Lam, 21, a Canadian student traveling alone, curious, bookish, a diary always in her bag. She checks in for a few nights, planning bookstores, coffee shops, the kind of wandering you do when a city is new and you are too. She phones home, she posts online, she sounds hopeful, and then she goes quiet. January 31st. A camera in an elevator records her. 4 minutes that will circle the internet for years. She steps in, presses buttons, peeks into the hall, steps out, steps back. Her hands move in quick shapes like she's trying to explain something no one else can see. The doors don't close. She hides, then looks again. And then she's gone. Her parents report her missing on February 8th. Police search the hotel. Dogs sweep hallways and the roof. Nothing, or maybe not enough. Days pass. Guests complain. The water is weak. The taste is wrong. The color, not right. A maintenance worker climbs a steel ladder to check the tanks on the roof. Inside one of them, he finds a body. February 19th, 2013. It's Elisa. People ask the same question. How did she get there? A locked rooftop door, a heavy tank lid, a slim girl, alone. The coroner's report arrives. Accidental drowning, no evidence of assault. A note, bipolar disorder, a significant contributing factor. The kind of line that sounds clinical, but carries a lifetime of meaning. If you don't know the Cecil, you should. It opened in 1924 with marble and mirrors, and then history bent. The Great Depression, Skid Row, a long ledger of tragedies. Jumps, overdoses, a falling body that killed a man on the sidewalk, even serial killers passing through. The building became a myth you could rent by the night. So when Elisa's story hit the news, when that elevator video went viral, the world connected the dots into monsters, ghosts, curses, conspiracies. But cops, doctors, and time pointed back at something smaller and sadder. A young traveler, unwell that night, in a maze of locked doors and industrial steel. Let's walk it carefully. The elevator footage, recorded February 1st, released February 13th to seek tips. Her behavior looks erratic, pressing many buttons, stepping in and out, making shapes with her hands. People online read it as fear, or play, or possession, but clinicians see something familiar, a potential psychotic episode. The coroner's line about bipolar wasn't random. Hotel logistics. The roof access is alarmed, but workers use alternate routes. Ladders on the tanks are exposed. The lids, heavy but openable. In that space, at night, you could climb. You could slip, and once inside, cold water, steep walls, and no leverage to climb out. Panic turns to exhaustion, silence. Still, there are details that won't stop whispering. Why didn't the dogs find her? Why didn't anyone hear? Why did the water taste wrong for days? Because the tank was sealed from sight, and sound dies on the roof. Because a hotel with a past like the Cecil invites stories, and stories breed faster than facts. Because grief hates the word accident. It wants a villain. Sometimes there isn't one you can name. The official answer sits in a few sentences. Elisa Lamb climbed into a water tank and drowned. Mental illness contributed. No criminal charge. Case closed. But for the rest of us, it's not. We replay the elevator. We imagine the roof, the wind, the city's neon buzz. We picture her choosing the wrong door. We picture her not choosing anything at all, just drifting through a night that got sharper, stranger, until steel and water took her in. There's another reason this story shakes people. Because hotels feel like containers for other people's lives. You close a door and the world shrinks to a bed, a lamp, a humming fan. You trust the building to hold you together. But the Cecil had been leaking tragedy for decades. And when tragedy happens in a place like that, it echoes. It colors the walls. It makes the ordinary feel haunted. If you stand across the street at night, the Cecil looks like a stack of dark teeth. Some windows glow, most don't. The rooftop is a silhouette, angles and ladders and tanks like sleeping giants. Somewhere up there, in February wind, a maintenance worker lifted a lid and changed a family forever. Elisa's parents asked for privacy and for people to remember their daughter as more than a mystery. She loved books. She wrote about loneliness and kindness and the small ways we stay alive together. Sometimes internet detectives forget that the case file ends with a person, not a puzzle box. So here is a truer ending. A young woman traveled because she wanted the world to feel larger. On a winter night, her mind betrayed her. A hotel with too much history and too little safety got the rest. When people ask why this story haunts them, I say, because it could happen to someone you love, in a city you trust, behind a door you've already closed. Because horror isn't always claws and shadows. Sometimes it's a ladder, a lid, and a mistake no one comes back to explain. If you ever ride that old elevator, if it still runs, you'll watch the numbers glow and hear the cables moan. You'll think of 4 minutes of video and a girl who steps out and never steps back in. The doors will shut on empty air and you'll feel it. How a place can remember even when people try to forget. And winter. A black sea. A lighthouse carved into rock like a tooth in the jaw of the Atlantic.
Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mug.
They called it Eilean Moor, the largest of the Flannan Isles, far off the coast of Scotland. 3 men lived there in shifts, tending the light so ships could live to see another dawn. Their names, James Duckett, Thomas Marshall, Donald MacArthur. Experienced, tough, the kind of men who knew how to listen to weather. Pause. They were supposed to be there when the supply ship came, but they were not. December 1900. A steamer passing in bad weather notes something wrong. The lighthouse is dark, no beam sweeping the sea. That message reaches the Northern Lighthouse Board, but storms delay the relief boat. Beat. When the tender Hesperus finally makes it out on the 26th of December, the captain tries the horn, fires a flare. No reply. No keeper at the landing, no flag on the pole, only waves grinding the stone. A small boat goes in. The relief keeper, Joseph Moore, climbs the path alone. He finds the gate closed, the main door closed. Inside, the beds are unmade, the clock is unwound. Lamps are cleaned and filled, as if the night had been prepared for. 1 set of oilskins is missing, 2 are not. Pause. The lighthouse is warm with human order, but empty of humans. Down at the west landing, the rocks tell a rougher story. A storage box high above the waterline splintered open, its contents thrown, iron railings bent, a track wrenched from concrete, turf ripped from the clifftop as if a giant hand had clawed it. The east landing is calm, the west mangled. The sea had come high and hard, or something had. The superintendent, Robert Muirhead, arrives to investigate. He knows these men. He hired them. He studies the clothes left behind and writes what he thinks happened. Duckett and Marshall went down to the west landing. MacArthur, perhaps seeing trouble, left in his shirt sleeves, no coat, no oilskins, to help. Whoever left last left the light unattended, against the rules. Soft. And then, nothing. Officially, there is no body to bury, no blood, no footprints that last, only damage, wind, and guesses. People begin to talk, they always do. Some say a rogue wave reared up out of a calm moment and tore the men away, ironwork and all. Others say they argued and one fell, pulling the rest with him. In the years to come, the story will grow barbs, foreign raiders, sea serpents, even voices on the wind calling the keepers' names. But the board will write a colder sentence, drowned by misadventure. The lighthouse goes back to work. The sea keeps its secrets. Let's walk the last day the way the facts allow. The light fails to show on December 15th. A passing ship logs it. Weather pins the relief boat in harbor. Days pass. When Hesperus arrives on the 26th, 3 obvious things are wrong. No flag, no welcome, no provision crates ready for resupply. Inside, time feels interrupted. A meal not quite cleared, a clock not wound. The domestic silence of people who meant to come back in a minute. Beat. They didn't. At the cliff's edge, the scene is violent in ways the sky does not explain. A box shattered 33 meters above sea level. Railings and a rail torn loose. A rock the size of a small car shifted from where a century of weather had left it, and up on the rim, more than 60 meters above the sea, turf peeled back 10 meters in. Hushed. Whatever hit this place hit it like a hammer. Could 3 men go down to secure gear, ropes, boxes, a crane, as a squall knotted itself behind the cliffs? Could a single freak wave rise, slam the landing, and yank them from the steps one by one? It has happened elsewhere. It could have happened here. The sea gives, the sea takes. Pause. But puzzle pieces keep sliding. Why was one set of oilskins still hanging if the weather was bad enough to tear iron from stone? Why was the lampwork done and tidy, as if someone had planned a calm night on watch? And why did no one on Hesperus find even a scrap of a man, not a cap, not a glove, on a rock that catches everything? Questions hang like mist over the lantern room. There's an old poem about this place, written after the fact, that makes the mystery into a haunting. That is what we do when we cannot carry randomness. We give it a face. We imagine whispers shaped like the missing men. We hear our names in the wind. But step back from the story and look at the map. These islands are a knife edge, and the Atlantic doesn't care if you are brave or careful. A safety line not tied, a boot turned on weed-slick stone, 1 man yelling and 2 men running to help. That's all it takes to make a legend out of 3 lives. Soft. And legends are louder than paperwork. The Northern Lighthouse Board kept the file. The names stayed. Ducat had a wife and 4 children. MacArthur, a wife and 2. Families learned to live with a sentence instead of a body. The lighthouse, meanwhile, did the one thing lighthouses must do. It kept shining. If you sail there now, if the weather lets you, Island Moor still looks like a story. The steps bite into the cliff. The tower stares without blinking. Pause. You can stand where the landing cranes once lifted crates of paraffin and flour and newspapers, and you can feel the place vibrate with what people have said about it for 100 years. But the most frightening version of the tale isn't the one with monsters. It is the one with physics. 1 wave, 3 men, no witnesses, a mainland storm delaying rescue, a dock lantern on a black sea. Sometimes horror is not a shadow that grows teeth. Sometimes it is a job done 1,000 times until it isn't. On paper, their case is tidy. Missing, presumed drowned. In the mind, it never is. The clock left unwound. The door left closed. The oilskins, 1 set forgotten or trusted not needed. The iron torn like ribbon. Beat. These are not ghosts. They are details. And details are the only hauntings that last. So when you hear someone call it the Flannan Isle mystery, remember that mysteries don't need curses to be terrible. They need distance, bad weather, and a minute where help is too far away. That is enough to erase 3 men and leave only a light, sweeping the water as if to say, here, here, here. And the sea answers, as it always has, not today.